Hi, I'm Valerie Engelhart, and in this video I am going to be painting the facade of this rocky cottage cafe. I am working on Fabriano 1264 student grade paper, and I am using a size 10 Princeton Neptune round brush, and I pulled out one of the first sets of watercolors that I purchased for myself about 6 years ago. However, not all of the colors are what came in the set. A few of them I placed in myself. But for this painting, I wanted to go really bright and cheerful to combat these gray skies, and I knew that pulling this out would be a quick way to do that. So right now I'm working with like yellow and orange because I want this to be bright and sunny and give me a little hit of dopamine that I need. Now, I got the reference photo that you can see on the left from Unsplash. I just searched like village or village building because I wanted something a little more cozy and with personality. I'm not going to be painting the entire scene because there are multiple buildings and a pathway. I am just focusing on that front-facing facade and the tree that's kind of beside it to help frame things. And right now I'm just going wet into wet, letting things fuse and merge because I do want that beautiful, vibrant quality of watercolor. Now, one thing that I often struggle with, especially when painting in this way, is that you definitely are working in layers. And so as I am working, this looks nothing like a building. It kind of looks like a beautiful, colorful, but mess. And every time, especially as I was painting it, I was just like, oh my gosh, are we doing this again? Because I've attempted this kind of painting many times before, and even using these colors. Now, not this exact painting, but something kind of architectural and man-made. But this time, I kept myself firm in that I was not going to judge it until it was done, and that I was going to approach it with the same attitude that I've been approaching all of my other paintings, such as the flowers and the animals, and even portraits. So I was determined to not let an unfamiliar subject get to me. Now, I do have my paper at an angle. I did tape 3 of the sides so that I wouldn't have as much warping of the paper. And at the bottom, I did just splash some clean water to get a little more movement, a little more spontaneity. Now I'm going in with some sap green because these windowsills have some plants, and I'm just putting in the green as a placeholder. And I'm using my brush to kind of measure out how I want that tree to be. But I want this to be incredibly loose. I want entire sections missing. And even though I'm really good at the whole lost and found edge thing, just leaving entire chunks missing is a little bit hard for me. I am going in with some salt because I do want some salt texture. But because I get that salt texture, I have to let this dry naturally, which, especially this time of year, takes a while. But it's worth it. It's worth it for those beautiful blooms. Now, I was planning on just doing the front of the facade, but I decided that I wanted to have a little bit of that side, but because that part's not in focus, I'm just going in with clean water at this point and letting that wet paint that's already on my paper bleed into the clean area, and then go and drop in some of the cobalt teal. This side of the building is going to have like no detail, but I still want something to be there. And then splashing a little more. All right, it took a while, but that painting finally dried. We are on to the second layer. So looking at this is a cool, abstract mess. But that's when we go on top with the details. So I've got a small flat brush. I've gone into my red. I think this is Windsor red. And I'm mimicking brick, but I don't want to paint every single brick. I'm looking at my reference image, which is in black and white, and I've isolated values so that we really only have a light tone, a medium tone, and a dark tone. And I'm using my imagination, and I am changing things up a bit. I am being inspired by my reference photo, but I am not following it beat for beat, stroke for stroke. I don't have that kind of patience. and architecture is not really my strong suit. So I'm vibing with it. I'm taking how I feel when I see it and going with it. But I would get bored trying to paint in all the bricks, and I feel like it would do disservice to that beautiful wash I put down previously. Now I am going in with a little bit of heavy red there, but because I am using the Fabriano 1264 paper, this paper has a quality in that paint lifts off of it pretty easily. And depending on what kind of painting you're doing, that could either be a great thing or a not so great thing. If you want to work in like layer after layer of glazes, this one might not be for you. But for me, putting down a mid-tone and then lifting paint off later to create a hazy highlight, well, I like that. So this works for me. I've been using a size to mimic rigger brush to do some of those detail line works, mostly like for separating the roof from the background. And I will be using it more for like the outlines of the windows before blurring them away, and arches and some of that line work, but I don't need to be so detailed. But notice, once I make my decision of where to paint a straight line, I do it very quickly. Like just a whoosh. Doing it quickly means that, well, one, it's more likely to be straight, because if you do it very slowly, I don't know about you, but my hand will wobble. But it gives that sense of confidence, and not just in painting, but in so many things in life, just having confidence can sway opinion. So by having confidence, I can sway the viewer. The viewer's not like, oh, she's not very good, she didn't really know what she was doing. Well, no, my brush strokes were confident and clean, so they're more likely to be like, oh yeah, that's so cool. How did they do that? Well, I mean, it was with the paintbrush and paint and paper. It's not that hard. Well, I'm gonna go off on a little tangent. Anytime anyone sees something like when I'm painting, they're like, I wish I could do that. Honey, you can. You don't even need a bunch of expensive supplies. Just get a few good quality paints, get a pad of paper, and like, really, I could have done this entire painting with only that size 10 round brush I'm using right now. I could have. Now, I found it more easy and a little more fun to pull out my other brushes, but they weren't absolutely necessary. But if you're watching this, you're probably somebody who already knows this and already paints. But in case someone's here for just a little bit of visual enjoyment in the background, or they're curious about painting, but they are not quite confident yet, that's where I'm talking about you right there. Yeah, you can paint. Watercolor's not that hard. It can be a little hard, but it's not hard if you just go in with an open mind and have fun. A brush, paper, some paint. Mostly, imagination, and an inquisitive nature. So there you go. If you can hold a brush, you can paint. And this really isn't that hard. I mean, you saw the beginning. I mostly just did a big blocky splotch. And now I'm just using my reference photo to be like, oh, okay, there's a window there. Let's put in half of the window. So like half a rectangle is going in, just a top and a side, a top and a side. Drop some more, vertical, horizontal, add clean water to make things diffuse and whimsical. Now, knowing exactly when to add water and how much and how hard something should be versus how loose and misty something should be, well, that's personal preference and practice. But what was it Bob Ross said, that talent is the pursuit of an interest? It was something like that. Like, if you pick up your brush, get paper and paint, and you want to do this, you can do this. All right, that block of red I put in earlier, it's looking too flat, a little too blocky, so I go in with a small synthetic flat brush, and I'm just lifting that paint off to create the brick shape. And I like that. And I like that the bricks towards the top are painted positively, whereas the bricks lower have been lifted, so it's more like a negative painting. And by having those two exist next to each other, it's just more visual interest. Now, one thing I love about this reference photo is that like curved awning above the door. So that is my focal point. That is where I want, bam, the drama. So I go in with my Winsor red, very strong, drop in a little bit of alizarin crimson, and then to deepen everything further, I go in with the Winsor violet that I've used on the windows elsewhere to really bring depth and to have those little sections in the awning that are like the ribbing or the wire. I just don't paint that in. I leave a gap. Now, if I had lost that gap, I could go in with white gouache later, but this entire painting is done with pure watercolor. I do not introduce any gouache, which is actually kind of impressive because I usually end up bringing it in at some point. So I'm actually looking back at that going, oh yeah, good job, Val. And then I'm not painting the bottom of the door. I'm just letting it fade away. Now I am using alizarin crimson here for this window, and then I'm going to introduce more of the purple. It's just, I didn't want things to get flat. I didn't want every shadow to be purple. So I just popped in a little bit of alizarin crimson, which is a cooler, darker red, just to give more variety. Shadows can be red. And that's one thing I like about using things like purple for shadows or just picking a darker value. Like, could you imagine if I had used black paint for all these shadows? It wouldn't look as pretty, would it? It wouldn't be as much fun. I do like using black paint in certain aspects, but for the most part, using it in shadows really deadens a painting. So I would recommend, definitely stick with maybe a cool color or something with a dark value, but use a different color. It can be blue, it can be purple. I love using purple. Or even a brown. A lot of people use Payne's Gray, and since Payne's Gray has some blue in it, yeah, that works. But I don't know, I really like the quality that the purple gives. And another name for this purple is dioxazine violet, just in case you really want this particular purple. It's actually a very good purple for painting shadows on skin. It is a transparent, non-granulating color, which is really good for that smooth skin transition into shadow. And I'm very intentionally not painting a street scene or the bottom of this building. I want those splashy bits to be where it ends and to be imagination. I waved my hand above my head and imagined a rainbow went over it. Imagination. And now I'm using that imagination with a little bit of sap green and Winsor green blue shade, and a little size 2 round brush to paint in some foliage under the window. Now, I am painting like little dots and leaving gaps, and then I'm going to soften it with water, but that way I have some differences in value and texture. I don't usually paint foliage in windows, but since I don't usually paint windows or buildings at all, yeah, this is pretty unfamiliar to me. And it is something that does not come naturally, so I will have to work, if I want to continue these sort of paintings, to improve my, potted plants. Now, I know I usually harp on value, and I think I've even done that in this video too. Oh, put a pin on that. So all I've done right here is went into a mix that I used for the other leaves, and I am adding more detail to the tree. I don't want it all over. I do want my texture showing through, but I do want to add a little more dimension. One problem I noticed is that my brush strokes mostly all head in an upwards motion. Not terrible, especially for a study, but I can do better next time. And just dotting it in. As I get down to the bottom, using more just of the pure sap green, and then having some of that connect into the awning, and letting that awning, which is still wet, start to bleed into that tree. And then I'll skip ahead a bit, but I do end up mixing some of the purple in with the green that I made, because all of that tree is looking too green. It's looking too vibrant. And so one thing I could do is mix the green with the red. I've already got red in the painting and that would make a wonderful shadow color, but because I've already got purple shadows, one way I like to make a desaturated green is mixing purple with the green. And it's just a personal preference. Now back to where I put that pin. So yes, I usually harp about value, and even in this painting, value is important and necessary to pay attention to. But let's give color some credit here. I love how vibrant and bright this is. This evokes a certain feeling in me. And can you imagine how different it would be if I used like my shadow pigments, or if I'd used my granulating Rockwell art paints? If I'd done maybe more pinks, if I did more cool tones or warm tones. And so all of that to say, yes, the value is really going to make things pop and make things interesting, but your color choice will set the mood. And so the mood here is bright and whimsical and fun and like clear skies. And I can imagine being on vacation and just like having the perfect day, because these colors are making me smile and they're bright. So there, kudos to color. And here's the finished painting. If you liked this video, press that like button so I know to make more like this. And if you want to see more, subscribe, because I make videos every Thursday. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.